In the heart of a bustling city, in a large mansion filled with art, high ceilings, and every comfort money could buy, lived a woman who had everything she could imagine. She had built her fortune over the years, starting from a small business and growing it into a vast empire. Her days were busy with meetings, phone calls, and decisions that shaped companies, industries, and even people's lives. She had a schedule so tight that even the thought of slowing down seemed impossible. Yet despite her wealth and success, she often felt a quiet emptiness, a sense that life held more mysteries than money or status could provide. On a bright morning, she stepped out of her mansion, ready for another day of appointments and meetings. The driveway was polished, the garden manicured to perfection, and the sun reflected off the glass windows like a golden shimmer. Her car waited, and inside it was the person she had come to trust more than anyone else, the man who drove her to every meeting, every event, and every corner of the city. He had been with her for years, a calm presence behind the wheel, always reliable, never asking for anything more than his salary and occasional acknowledgement. She knew him as polite, quiet, and professional. She never thought much beyond that. He was just the person who got her from point A to point B safely. But that morning, something unusual happened that caught her completely off guard. As she climbed into the back seat of her car, she noticed him speaking on his phone. At first, she didn't think much of it. People talk on phones all the time. But as she leaned slightly forward, straining to hear, she realized something extraordinary. His words flowed naturally, not in her language, but in another, then another and another. It sounded like a mix of familiar and unfamiliar sounds, each one distinct, each one fluent. Within moments, he switched from one language to another without hesitation, without a single pause, as if each voice belonged to a different person. Her eyes widened in astonishment. She had always known him as competent and intelligent, but this was something she had never expected. 9 languages. She counted in her mind, trying not to seem obvious, and by the time she had reached her office building, she was sure she had heard at least 9. She had heard foreign businessmen talk on TV, watched diplomats converse, and listened to language experts switch from one tongue to another. But hearing it from the man who simply drove her car every day was shocking. Who was he? How did he learn all these languages? All day, her mind wandered back to that moment. During meetings, while signing documents, while listening to reports, she could barely focus. The words he had spoken played over and over in her head. They sounded effortless, natural, as if he had been speaking them all his life. She tried to picture his life, imagining a childhood filled with books and teachers, with trips around the world. But she knew he had grown up in a small town, in an ordinary neighborhood where people struggled to get by. She had heard fragments of his story before, the small apartment, the family that worked hard to make ends meet. But nothing had suggested this kind of talent. It didn't fit the image she had of him. Curiosity gnawed at her. She felt a mix of admiration and a strange sense of envy. She realized that while she had spent her life acquiring wealth and power, he had acquired something far rarer: skills, knowledge, and the ability to communicate with people across the world. She thought about all the possibilities this kind of ability could bring. The man could travel anywhere, make connections with anyone, understand cultures she could only read about. And yet here he was, driving her car every day, quietly going about his work, invisible in a way that she herself had never been. The next morning, she decided she could no longer keep her curiosity contained. She found herself waiting for him to finish preparing the car, trying to act casual, asking a few questions about the weather, the traffic, and other mundane matters. But inside, her mind was racing with thoughts about the languages he spoke. Finally, unable to resist, she asked him directly in her calm and measured voice how he had learned them. He looked at her with a polite smile, a little surprised at the question. Then he leaned back slightly and spoke softly, almost shyly. He explained that it wasn't something that had come to him overnight, or because of extraordinary circumstances. He had grown up surrounded by people who spoke different languages. He had always been curious, asking questions, listening carefully, and repeating what he heard. He had spent years practicing, sometimes on his own, sometimes with friends or travelers who passed through his town. He had made mistakes, many mistakes, but he had kept going. He described how he had turned every opportunity into a learning moment, listening to music in other languages, watching videos, speaking to anyone willing to talk with him. It sounded so simple, Yet she knew that few people could ever manage it with the same dedication. She listened intently, captivated not just by his story, but by the calm way he told it. There was no boastfulness, no arrogance, only a quiet pride and satisfaction in what he had achieved through patience and curiosity. She realized that this was more than a skill. It was a reflection of character, a demonstration of persistence and passion. She had always admired people who had discipline and focus, but she had never expected to find it in someone she had taken for granted every day. The car ride that morning passed in a blur for her. She hardly noticed the traffic, the streets, or the other cars. All she could think about was the man sitting in the driver's seat, his story, and the realization that her world of luxury, power, and influence had left her blind to the richness of knowledge and skill that existed beyond her immediate environment. She felt a twinge of guilt for never having truly noticed him before, for never having considered what made him exceptional. But she also felt a spark of excitement, a desire to learn from him, to understand the secret behind his abilities. Over the following days, she found herself observing him more closely. She noticed the small habits that had gone unnoticed before, the way he organized his day, how he remembered details about people he met, how he seemed genuinely interested in others' experiences. Every interaction, every observation seemed to confirm what she had already sensed. There was more to him than met the eye, and it was something she wanted to uncover. The turning point came one afternoon when she happened to hear him speaking again while waiting for her at a cafe. He was helping a tourist with directions, effortlessly switching between languages, making the person feel comfortable and understood. She watched as the tourist's face lit up with gratitude, and she realized that this ability was not just about words. It was about connection, understanding, and empathy. He had found a way to reach people that she had spent years trying to master in her own business, but in a way that felt natural, human, and unforced. That evening, she sat alone in her mansion, thinking about what she had witnessed. She realized that she had stumbled upon something rare, a talent that went beyond mere intelligence or education. It was a combination of curiosity, dedication, and human connection. She knew that if she could learn even a fraction of what he had mastered, it could change not just her life but the way she interacted with the world. And so a decision began to form in her mind. She would speak to him directly, not just as an employee or a driver, but as a teacher and mentor. She would ask him to share the methods behind his skill, to reveal the secret that had fascinated her so completely. As she drifted off to sleep that night, she imagined the conversations they could have, the lessons she could learn, and the possibilities that awaited. She felt a sense of anticipation, a rare feeling that even her wealth and influence could not provide. It was not just about learning languages. It was about discovering a new way to approach life, to see the world with curiosity and openness, and to recognize that greatness often lies in unexpected places. She fell asleep with a renewed sense of purpose, eager for the day when she would finally sit down with the man who had turned a simple car ride into an extraordinary revelation. The next day, she found herself more attentive than ever. As she prepared for her morning appointments, she watched him move around the driveway, arranging the car, checking the tires, and making sure everything was perfect. There was a calm precision in the way he worked, a rhythm that seemed effortless. She realized she had never noticed these small details before, too absorbed in her own busy life to pay attention to the quiet competence that surrounded her every day. When she climbed into the car, she greeted him warmly, trying to act casual. Her mind, however, was spinning with questions she wanted to ask. She had already made a decision. She would talk to him, learn from him, and understand the secret behind his extraordinary ability. But as the car moved smoothly through the city streets, she hesitated. How should she approach him? How could she ask for guidance without sounding patronizing? She had power, wealth, and influence, but here, in this moment, she felt unsure. Finally, she broke the silence. She asked him if he could share more about his childhood, where he grew up, and what made him interested in languages. He looked at her with a quiet curiosity, as if he had not expected the question. Then he began to speak, describing his small hometown, the crowded streets, the people from different backgrounds who lived nearby. He spoke about the simple joys of childhood, playing in the open fields, listening to neighbors, learning songs from different cultures. It was a life that seemed ordinary at first glance, but through his words, she realized it was rich with Experiences that had shaped his mind in ways books and classrooms never could. He told her about the first time he tried to speak in another language. It was clumsy, awkward, and embarrassing. He had made mistakes that made people laugh, but he kept going. He explained that every error had been a lesson, every failure a step forward. He described spending hours listening to travelers, repeating phrases, practicing pronunciations until they felt natural. She could see the spark of determination in his eyes, the way his passion had carried him forward despite the obstacles. She listened, fascinated as he described how he had learned to pay attention to small details, how a slight change in tone could completely change the meaning of a word, how body language and gestures could help convey understanding when words failed, how listening more than speaking had allowed him to absorb the essence of each language. His methods were simple, yet they required patience, focus, and humility, qualities that she admired deeply, but had often overlooked in her own life, rushed as she was by deadlines and obligations. As they drove through the city, she asked him about the challenges he had faced along the way. He spoke of times when he felt frustrated, when learning a new language seemed impossible. He described moments of doubt, when he questioned whether he would ever be good enough, whether he could truly master something so complex. Yet each time he found a way to continue. He explained that curiosity and persistence had been his guides, and that the desire to connect with people, to understand them, had always been stronger than any fear of failure. She felt a surge of admiration. This was not just talent, it was character, forged through years of dedication and self-discipline. The woman found herself reflecting on her own life. She had built an empire, yes, but at what cost? She realized she had often relied on her wealth and influence to achieve her goals, sometimes overlooking the value of patience and consistent effort. She began to see the driver not just as an employee, but as a teacher, someone from whom she could learn lessons that money alone could never buy. The thought excited her. She had always believed that learning was a lifelong journey, but she had not expected to find a mentor in such an unexpected place. During the ride, she asked him how he practiced without formal schooling or expensive resources. He smiled and explained that he had turned everyday life into a classroom. Conversations with strangers, songs on the radio, books in different languages, even watching television shows all became tools for learning. He emphasized that what mattered most was the willingness to try, to make mistakes, and to keep going. It was a method that required patience and curiosity more than anything else. She realized how much she had underestimated him. She had assumed that a person in his position could not have achieved such mastery. Yet here he was, speaking 9 languages fluently, navigating the world with a skill she had long admired but never possessed. She felt a mix of humility and inspiration, understanding that true talent often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to notice it. Over the next few days, she began to pay closer attention. She noticed how he organized his day, how he managed small tasks with care, how he listened to the people around him. She realized that the skills he had developed were not limited to language. They extended to life itself. He had cultivated focus, empathy, and discipline in a way that she had never fully appreciated. The more she observed, the more she wanted to learn, not just the languages, but the mindset, the approach, the philosophy behind his success. One afternoon, she decided to ask him directly if he would be willing to teach her. She explained her interest, not in a commanding tone, but with genuine curiosity and respect. He paused for a moment, considering her request. Then, slowly, he nodded, agreeing to share his methods. He emphasized that it would not be easy, that it would require effort and patience, but that she could certainly learn if she was willing to commit. The woman felt a thrill of excitement. For the first time in a long while, she was about to embark on a journey not dictated by her wealth or status, but by curiosity, dedication, and a desire to grow. The first session was informal. They sat, in the study of her mansion, surrounded by books, maps, and artifacts collected from around the world. He began by explaining the importance of listening and observation. He taught her how to pay attention to the sounds of words, the flow of sentences, and the subtle differences that could change meaning entirely. She was surprised at how much she had overlooked in her own experiences. how much listening and observation could reveal if she paid attention. As the days turned into weeks, their sessions became a regular part of her routine. She found herself eagerly anticipating each meeting, looking forward to the small victories, the moments when she could recognize a word, a phrase, or even an accent. The process was slow, sometimes frustrating, but always rewarding. She began to understand that the secret was not in shortcuts or genius, but in consistency, practice, and genuine interest. Each new word she learned was a small triumph. Each phrase she mastered a step closer to understanding the method that had seemed so magical at first. The woman also noticed changes in herself beyond language. She became more patient, more attentive, more open to new experiences. The process of learning with him taught her to embrace mistakes, to value persistence, and to approach challenges with curiosity rather than fear. She realized that the lessons extended far beyond words. They were about life, growth, and human connection. Meanwhile, the driver continued his work with the same calm, professional demeanor he had always displayed. Yet she began to see him in a new light, not just as an employee, but as a guide, a mentor, and a reminder that true talent often comes from dedication and curiosity, rather than position or privilege. She felt grateful, humbled, and inspired, understanding that she had stumbled upon something rare and extraordinary, a teacher in an unexpected place, whose methods could transform not just her abilities, but her perspective on life. As the city moved on around them, she realized that this journey had only just begun. There were countless lessons to learn, skills to develop, and insights to gain. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and excitement, eager to continue, to grow, and to discover the world through the eyes of someone who had mastered the art of learning through curiosity, patience, and human connection. Each session brought new challenges and new revelations, reinforcing her belief that knowledge was not a destination, but a lifelong adventure. And in the quiet moments, she found herself grateful for the chance encounter that had revealed a world of possibility hidden in plain sight, waiting for her to embrace it. Over the following weeks, their sessions became a rhythm she eagerly looked forward to. Each morning before her meetings, she would sit in the study with him, notebooks open and pens ready, prepared to absorb everything he could teach. At first, she focused on the basics, common phrases, simple sentences, and pronunciation. He encouraged her to repeat words slowly, to listen to the flow of the language, and to pay attention to how native speakers expressed even the smallest ideas. She realized that this process was different from anything she had learned before. It wasn't about memorizing facts or following strict rules. It was about understanding patterns, sounds, and human expression. He explained the importance of listening first. "You must hear before you speak," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "Language is more than words, it is feeling, intention, and rhythm. If you do not listen carefully, you cannot understand the heart of what is being said." At first, she found this difficult. She had always relied on her intellect to understand new concepts quickly, expecting instant results. But language was different. It required patience, repetition, and humility. She had to slow down, pay attention, and accept that mistakes were not failures. They were steps in learning. Each day, he introduced a new concept, a new pattern, or a small dialogue. Sometimes it was simple greetings or common expressions. Other times it was complex sentence structures that challenged her. He would speak slowly, then gradually increase the speed, encouraging her to match the pace. At times, she stumbled over the words, mispronounced them, or forgot phrases entirely. But he never criticized. Instead, he would calmly guide her back, showing her the correct way and giving her tips to remember. She began to understand that his teaching style was not just about language. It was about learning itself, teaching her resilience, patience, and focus. She also noticed how he encouraged curiosity. If she asked why a word sounded a certain way or why a phrase was structured differently, he would explain with examples, drawing comparisons to other languages she had heard. In the quiet afternoons, when the mansion was still, she would practice on her own, repeating words in front of mirrors, listening to recordings, and trying to mimic the accents and tones. Sometimes it felt frustrating, as progress was slow and mistakes were frequent. But she had learned from him that patience was as important as effort. She began to enjoy the process, finding satisfaction in small victories, correctly pronouncing a difficult phrase, understanding a sentence, or even thinking in a new language for a brief moment. Each success, no matter how minor, brought a sense of achievement that went beyond the lessons themselves. One afternoon, while practicing, she realized how much her perspective on learning had changed. She had always associated success with speed, efficiency, and immediate results. But here, she was learning to value persistence, incremental progress, and the joy of discovery. The process was slow, but it was meaningful. She began to apply the same mindset to other parts of her life, approaching meetings, negotiations, and challenges with more focus, patience, and openness. She was surprised at how much one skill could influence her entire approach to life. During their sessions, he also taught her about context, how words changed meaning depending on the situation, tone, and body language. He explained that a single word could carry multiple emotions, and understanding the speaker's intent was just as important as understanding the words themselves. She began to realize that this skill extended beyond language. It was about observing people, reading subtle cues, and connecting with others on a deeper level. The lessons were transforming her not just as a learner, but as a person, making her more empathetic, attentive, and present. He encouraged her to immerse herself in the language. He would suggest listening to songs, watching shows, or reading simple texts. At first, she felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of new sounds and words, but as she persisted, she began to recognize familiar patterns, phrases, and structures. Slowly, comprehension grew, and with it, confidence. She felt a thrill each time she understood something new, a quiet pride in her own persistence. The mansion, once a place of routine and predictability, now felt alive with learning, curiosity, and discovery. Outside their formal sessions, she began to notice him in a new light. The calm efficiency he displayed in daily tasks, the thoughtfulness in how he interacted with others, and the quiet humility in his demeanor, all of these qualities now seemed connected to his ability to learn and master languages. She understood that the skill was not isolated. It was part of a larger mindset of discipline, curiosity, and human understanding. She realized that he had developed habits that allowed him to grow continuously, and these habits were more valuable than any single talent. As her skills improved, she started to engage in small conversations with him in the new language. At first, they were clumsy and halting, filled with mistakes and corrections, but each exchange brought a sense of connection and joy. She found herself laughing at her errors, appreciating the patience he showed, and feeling the thrill of understanding a response without translation. These moments were intimate, not in a romantic sense, but in a human way, sharing a skill, learning together, and building trust through patience and effort. The woman also began to see a ripple effect in her daily life. Meetings felt more manageable, negotiations became clearer, and she found herself listening more carefully to people around her. The patience and attention required for language learning spilled into other areas, improving her focus and decision-making. She realized that learning was not just about acquiring new knowledge, it was about reshaping the mind, developing resilience, and appreciating the value of effort over instant results. One evening, she reflected on the journey so far. She thought about the driver, about how he had quietly nurtured a remarkable skill without recognition, fame, or wealth. She felt a deep respect and admiration for him. His journey had been one of quiet persistence, self-motivation, and curiosity. It made her consider her own achievements, how much of her success was due to resources, connections, and opportunity, and how much was due to discipline, focus, and genuine effort. She realized that while wealth could open doors, skills, dedication, and human understanding could take her further than she had imagined. As they continued their lessons, she began to understand that language was more than communication. It was a way to connect with people, understand cultures, and see the world differently. She appreciated the beauty and the nuances of expression, the subtle emotions carried by words, and the power of listening deeply. She realized that her own life had been busy and loud, filled with transactions and schedules, But through this learning, she had discovered the quiet richness of human connection. She noticed that her attitude toward challenges had shifted. Mistakes no longer felt like failures. They were opportunities to learn, to adjust, and to grow. She approached problems with curiosity instead of frustration, with patience instead of haste. Her interactions with colleagues, friends, and family began to change subtly. She listened more, observed more, and responded with understanding rather than impulsiveness. She saw how this simple skill, learning a new language with dedication, was transforming her entire perspective on life. Through these weeks of study, she developed a sense of gratitude, not just for the skills she was learning, but for the person teaching them. She realized that extraordinary talent often exists in ordinary places, waiting for recognition. The driver had chosen humility and consistency over recognition, yet his skill was extraordinary. She felt fortunate to witness and learn from it. She recognized that the true value lay not in the languages themselves, but in the mindset, dedication, and curiosity that had created them. By now, the woman felt a quiet confidence in her progress. She could speak simple sentences, understand basic conversations, and even catch nuances she had missed before. The sessions no longer felt like lessons. They felt like exploration, a journey into new ways of thinking and seeing the world. She was no longer just a student. She was an active participant, curious, engaged, and eager to improve. Each day brought new challenges and new triumphs, reinforcing the idea that learning was not just a skill but a lifelong journey. In these moments, she reflected on the power of mentorship and human connection. She realized that guidance, patience, and encouragement could open doors that resources alone could not. The driver had not only taught her language skills, but had also demonstrated how discipline, curiosity, and humility could transform a life. She felt a deep respect and admiration for him, recognizing that the greatest teachers were often those who led by example, quietly and consistently, without seeking recognition. As the city moved on outside, she sat in the study, notebooks filled with new words and phrases, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had not experienced in years. She realized that this journey was about more than speaking new languages. It was about understanding, patience, and growth. Each word learned, each sentence mastered, was a step toward becoming not just more skilled, but more human, more connected, and more aware. And in this quiet journey, guided by someone she had once overlooked, she discovered a richness in life that no wealth could ever provide. As the weeks turned into months, her skills began to grow in ways she had never imagined. Each session with him felt less like a lesson and more like an adventure. She could now recognize different accents, understand context, and even carry short conversations. What had started as curiosity had become passion. She discovered that learning a language was not just about words. It was about connecting with people, seeing the world from another perspective, and understanding emotions that transcended speech. One afternoon, while practicing, he encouraged her to try speaking in a public setting. She felt nervous at first, but the thought of testing her progress excited her. They went to a nearby cafe where she greeted the barista in a new language. At first, the words felt awkward, her pronunciation faltering, but the barista responded warmly, smiling and answering in the same language. She realized that communication was not about perfection, but about effort and intent. The small success filled her with confidence, and she understood what he had been teaching all along. Connection mattered more than flawless execution. She began to notice changes in her daily life. Meetings that once felt rushed and stressful became opportunities to observe and listen more carefully. Negotiations and conversations with colleagues improved as she applied the patience and attention to detail she had cultivated while learning languages. She found herself more present, more empathetic, and more patient. The lessons she learned were not limited to words. They were shaping her character, influencing her relationships, and making her more effective in both personal and professional life. He also taught her the value of curiosity beyond language. They would often talk about culture, history, and human behavior, connecting language to the lives of the people who spoke it. She learned that understanding a culture, its traditions, and its stories could enhance her ability to communicate meaningfully. She realized that knowledge was not just about information, it was about insight, perspective, and empathy. Each conversation with him opened a new door, showing her that learning could be endless and rewarding in unexpected ways. One evening, she reflected on how far she had come. She could now converse confidently in multiple languages and was beginning to think in them rather than just translating in her mind. The sense of achievement was exhilarating. But more than that, she felt a change within herself. She was calmer, more focused, and more willing to embrace challenges. Mistakes no longer frustrated her. They were lessons. Effort felt fulfilling, and learning became a source of joy rather than pressure. She realized that growth was a continuous journey, and that patience and persistence were keys to success in all aspects of life. He noticed the transformation as well. He could see her confidence building, her curiosity deepening, and her approach to challenges evolving. He felt a quiet pride, not in his own teaching, but in her willingness to embrace the process. He reminded her that skills were not just measured by ability, but by the mindset behind them. It was not about how quickly one could learn, but about the dedication, patience, and attention to detail that sustained progress over time. They began to explore more advanced aspects of language. She learned idioms, expressions, and cultural nuances that brought the language to life. They would practice storytelling, role-playing, and problem-solving in different languages. Each exercise revealed the richness of communication, showing her that words were only part of the picture. Tone, timing, and body language could convey as much meaning as vocabulary. She learned to read the subtleties in others, to understand intent, and to communicate with authenticity and empathy. This deeper understanding strengthened her ability to connect with people in all areas of life. During one session, he challenged her to listen to a conversation in a foreign language without interrupting or translating. At first it felt overwhelming, but gradually she began to recognize patterns, tone, and meaning. She realized that true understanding came from immersion and attention, not memorization. This lesson extended beyond language learning. She applied it to her work, listening carefully to colleagues and clients, understanding unspoken cues, and responding with insight. She saw that patience and observation were powerful tools in all human interactions. Her transformation was not limited to her skills. She began to appreciate the quiet impact of everyday actions and habits. The driver's consistency, humility, and focus inspired her to reflect on her own life. She realized that her success had been built on opportunity and resources, but true mastery came from dedication, curiosity, and persistence. She felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons he had shared, recognizing that the most valuable teachers often come in unexpected forms and from unexpected places. As her ability grew, she started to apply it outside formal lessons. She would greet visitors, employees, and acquaintances in their native languages, often surprising them with her effort and sincerity. The reactions she received were heartwarming. People appreciated the recognition and effort. She understood that language was more than a skill. It was a bridge, a way to connect with people, to show respect, and to create understanding. The simple act of speaking in someone's language created trust and warmth, something she had never fully realized before. She also discovered that learning alongside someone she trusted created a sense of shared purpose. Their sessions were not one-sided. They became a collaboration, a partnership of effort and curiosity. She learned not just from him, but with him, sharing discoveries, insights, and small victories. The process built mutual respect and deepened her understanding of the value of human connection. She realized that learning was not just a personal journey, but a shared experience that could strengthen relationships and foster empathy. As months passed, she reflected on how this journey had reshaped her. She was no longer just a successful businesswoman. She was a learner, a connector, and a more empathetic individual. The driver's teaching had shown her the value of effort, patience, and curiosity. She had learned that mastery was not about shortcuts or talent alone, but about consistent practice, attention to detail, and the willingness to embrace mistakes. These lessons extended far beyond language, influencing every aspect of her life. One evening, she shared her thoughts with him, expressing gratitude not just for the languages she had learned, but for the perspective he had given her. She realized that the journey had been about more than communication. It had been about transformation, about seeing life through a lens of curiosity, patience, and empathy. He listened quietly with a modest smile, acknowledging her words without fanfare. The simplicity of his approach, his humility, and his dedication had left a profound impact on her. She began to recognize that the lessons she had learned could influence others as well. She thought about her colleagues, friends, and family, considering how the principles of patience, curiosity, and persistent effort could improve their lives too. She felt inspired to share not just the languages, but the approach, the mindset, and the philosophy that had guided her learning. She realized that growth was contagious, and that the impact of a dedicated teacher could extend far beyond the classroom or study. Through this journey, she had also developed a new perspective on humility. Despite her wealth and influence, she had found that there was always more to learn, always someone who could teach her something valuable. The driver, who had once been invisible in her daily life, had become a guide, a mentor, and an example of how talent combined with persistence could achieve extraordinary results. She realized that recognition was not necessary for greatness. Effort, consistency, and integrity were enough. By now, she could hold conversations with people from different backgrounds, understand subtle cues, and appreciate cultural differences in ways she had never before imagined. Each success brought not just skill, but a sense of connection and understanding. She felt enriched, not just by knowledge but by the human relationships that the language had helped her build. She realized that the journey of learning was as much about personal growth as it was about practical skills. The lessons also influenced her leadership style. She became more patient with her team, more attentive to their needs, and more willing to listen before making decisions. She noticed that people responded positively, appreciating her efforts to understand them and communicate meaningfully. She realized that effective leadership was not just about strategy or authority. It was about connection, empathy, and the ability to listen deeply. The skills she had learned from the driver were transforming her life in ways she had never anticipated. One day, as they were finishing a session, she reflected on the journey. She thought about the quiet determination, humility, and curiosity that had made him extraordinary. She realized that the most valuable lessons often came from unexpected places, and that human potential could be nurtured with patience, effort, and care. She felt gratitude, inspiration, and a renewed sense of purpose. The driver had not only taught her languages, but had shown her a path to becoming more skilled, more empathetic, and more connected to the world. In the quiet of her study, surrounded by notes, books, and reminders of the journey she had undertaken, she understood that this experience was not just a chapter in her life. It was a turning point. She had discovered the power of learning, the value of persistence, and the richness of human connection. Each lesson had brought her closer to understanding herself, others, and the world around her. She felt ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, confident that with curiosity, patience, and dedication, there were no limits to what she could achieve. The journey was ongoing, and she welcomed it with open arms, knowing that the lessons she had learned would guide her for the rest of her life. Months had passed since she first discovered his remarkable skill, and the lessons had become a part of her daily life. She had grown more confident, patient, and curious, and her ability to communicate in several languages had reached a level she could have hardly imagined when the journey began. But more than the language itself, she realized the true gift lay in the mindset, discipline, and humility she had absorbed from him. She began to think about how she could use this knowledge beyond her personal growth. Her life had always been filled with business meetings, negotiations, and constant decision-making. While she had achieved success, she recognized that communication had often been limited to transactions and instructions. Now, with her new skills and understanding, she could connect with people in a deeper, more meaningful way. She wanted to explore opportunities to share what she had learned, not for recognition or reward, but to inspire others to cultivate curiosity, patience, and resilience. One day, she invited him to sit with her in the study after her meetings. The mansion was quiet, filled with the soft light of the afternoon sun. She spoke candidly, expressing her gratitude for his guidance and patience. She explained that his teaching had transformed not only her ability to speak different languages, but her entire approach to life. She told him that she wanted to find ways to pass on these lessons, to help others experience the same growth and understanding she had gained. He listened quietly, his calm demeanor unwavering. When she finished, he smiled modestly, and said that the most important thing was for her to continue practicing what she had learned and to lead by example. He reminded her that influence was not just about words or skill, but about integrity, consistency, and the willingness to keep learning. She realized the truth in his words. The lessons were not just for her, but for everyone she interacted with, and the best way to share them was through action and example. Inspired by this conversation, she began to implement small changes in her daily life and work. She started greeting employees in their native languages, listening more attentively during meetings and taking time to understand people's perspectives before making decisions. The changes were subtle, but they had a profound effect. People responded with openness and trust, and she found that conversations became more genuine and productive. The principles she had learned, patience, observation, and curiosity, were transforming her relationships as much as her skills. She also began exploring ways to formalize the process for others. She thought about workshops, seminars, and small group sessions where she could introduce the principles of learning and connection that she had gained. She envisioned a program that emphasized curiosity, effort, and human understanding, rather than rote memorization or technical training. Her goal was not to teach everyone 9 languages, but to show that skills could be cultivated through dedication, attention, and practice. She wanted others to see that growth was possible, no matter their background or circumstances. Throughout this period, her relationship with him continued to evolve. He remained humble, patient, and focused, but she began to recognize him not just as a teacher but as a partner in exploration. Their conversations extended beyond language to culture, life experiences, and the way people learn. She realized that learning was never truly isolated, it was connected to life itself. The more she understood this, the more she appreciated the depth of his wisdom and the quiet strength it took to master such skills while living a modest life. As her knowledge grew, she became more adventurous in practicing it. She would engage with tourists, visitors, and colleagues in new languages, testing her comprehension and expression. Each interaction brought a sense of exhilaration and satisfaction, reinforcing the lessons she had absorbed. She discovered that making mistakes publicly no longer caused embarrassment. Instead, it was part of the journey, a demonstration of courage and effort. People often responded with encouragement and appreciation, showing her that authenticity and willingness to try mattered more than perfection. One evening, she reflected on the journey and the quiet of her study. The mansion, filled with books, artwork, and reminders of her life's achievements, now felt like a place of learning and growth. She thought about how much her life had changed, not just in skill but in perspective, attitude, and understanding. She realized that the greatest lessons often came from unexpected sources and that talent, dedication, and humility could transform anyone's life, regardless of status or wealth. She also began to see the larger implications of what she had learned. Language, she realized, was more than communication. It was a bridge to understanding, empathy, and connection. By embracing curiosity and patience, she could reach people in ways she had never imagined. She thought about the opportunities to build relationships across cultures, to foster trust and understanding in her business and personal life. The skills she had gained were now tools for influence, not through authority or resources, but through genuine human connection. Encouraged by this realization, she started creating small gatherings at her home. People from different backgrounds, cultures, and professions were invited to share stories, practice languages, and engage in meaningful conversations. The gatherings became a space for learning and exchange, fostering an environment where curiosity was celebrated and effort was recognized. She watched as participants gained confidence, learned from each other, and began to appreciate the process of learning as a journey rather than a task. It was a reflection of the lessons she had learned from him, that growth was about dedication, patience, and the willingness to embrace challenges. He continued to be her mentor, guiding her through advanced concepts, correcting nuances, and encouraging her to explore new ways of thinking. Yet she noticed a change in their dynamic. She was no longer a beginner relying solely on his instruction. She was an active participant, contributing insights, asking thoughtful questions, and applying the principles she had learned in creative ways. Their partnership had become a collaboration, a shared journey of growth and discovery. Her success in learning languages and connecting with people began to attract attention. Colleagues, friends, and even strangers noticed her improved communication skills, empathy, and patience. She began to share the story of her learning journey, not to boast but to inspire others to embrace curiosity and consistent effort. She emphasized that skill and understanding could be developed by anyone willing to dedicate time, pay attention, and persevere. Her story became a testament to the power of human potential, resilience, and the quiet strength of mentorship. One day, she invited him to a small event where she shared the principles of learning and human connection with a wider audience. He observed quietly from the side, his modest smile revealing a sense of pride. She spoke about patience, curiosity, persistence, and empathy, demonstrating how these principles had transformed her life. She highlighted that extraordinary skills could emerge from ordinary circumstances, and that anyone could grow if they approached learning with dedication and humility. The audience responded with enthusiasm, inspired by the journey and the authenticity of the lessons. After the event, she and he returned to the quiet of her study. She expressed gratitude once again, not only for the skills he had taught her, but for the perspective and life lessons that had come with them. She realized that the journey had changed her in ways beyond measurement. She had grown in skill, understanding, empathy, and confidence. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that the lessons would continue to guide her and that she had the opportunity to share them with others. The driver remained humble, his presence calm and steady. She recognized that his greatest contribution was not just his knowledge but his example. The demonstration that consistent effort, curiosity, and humility could create extraordinary results. She felt fortunate to have witnessed and learned from someone who embodied these qualities so naturally. She understood that the lessons were timeless and universal, applicable not only to language but to every aspect of life. As the sun set outside her mansion, she reflected on the journey from the moment she first overheard him speaking 9 languages to the present. She thought about the initial curiosity, the small victories, the challenges, and the growth that had followed. She realized that the journey had been more than acquiring a skill. It had been about transformation, insight, and connection. She felt a sense of completeness, not in having mastered a set of languages, but in having learned the principles that could guide her through any challenge or opportunity. In the days that followed, she continued to practice, explore, and share her knowledge. The lessons became an integral part of her life, influencing the way she approached business, relationships, and personal growth. She recognized that learning was never truly finished. It was a continuous journey, shaped by curiosity, persistence, and the willingness to embrace new experiences. And in this ongoing journey, she carried the quiet gratitude for the driver who had opened her eyes, guided her patiently, and shown her that extraordinary skills could emerge from ordinary circumstances through dedication, humility, and the human desire to connect. The story of their journey became a quiet inspiration for her inner circle. She shared it not as a tale of wealth or privilege, but as a testament to the power of human potential and mentorship. People who heard it were reminded that skill, understanding, and personal growth could come from unexpected places, and that anyone willing to dedicate themselves with patience and curiosity could achieve remarkable things. She knew that the lessons would stay with her forever, shaping her actions, decisions, and relationships for years to come. And in the stillness of her study, as she reviewed her notes and reflected on her journey, she realized that the greatest gift she had received was not merely the ability to speak in multiple languages, but the understanding that growth, connection, and learning were limitless. With dedication, patience, curiosity, and the guidance of someone who truly understood the power of consistent effort, she knew that she could continue to evolve, explore, and connect with the world in ways she had never imagined. The journey, she understood, was ongoing, and she welcomed it fully, knowing that every lesson learned, every connection made, and every effort invested was a step toward becoming a wiser, more capable, and more compassionate human being.